Okay, folks, back to Battle for Azeroth. So I wanted to talk about Azerite Armor. Hadn't really seen anybody talking about it. Was going to do this after I reached 120, and I thought, well, maybe I'm being a little too quick to judge. Maybe the experience changes as you get further along into end content, and I'm finding my thoughts really aren't changing. They're staying more the same. So, with the general idea of Azerite Armor, I was curious. In my mind, I was thinking of something along the lines of the crafted gear in Warlords. As odd as that may sound, at that time you could only have 3 pieces of crafted gear, and then you upgraded those as the expansion went along. So this sounded very similar. So I thought, oh, okay, you'll get 3 pieces. You'll know you'll have those pieces, and then you can just upgrade them as you go along. Not only that, you got to pick abilities as you went along. I thought, great, that's great. So you need the first thing that if we're going to do this kind of in chronological order, the first thing is that you need the Heart of Azeroth in order to use the Azerite Armor, which doesn't entirely make a lot of sense because the Heart of Azeroth doesn't seem to have any effect on the Azerite Armor. You upgrade the Heart of Azeroth, it doesn't seem to do anything with the armor pieces you have equipped. So that's a bit strange, at least to me, kind of right from the start. But okay, this is the artifact in this expansion. Okay, that's fine, and this is fine. So the first piece of armor you get is from the quest in Silithus. And the first thing I noticed right off the right from the start was that, and this may be my biggest criticism of this whole idea, is you either have to pick a neutral ability that work on all 3 specs, or you have to pick a spec-specific ability. And we've kind of had this argument before, and I think back to, it was a little different, but I think back to Miss Pandora with the legendary cloak quest. People said, well, if we're working on the cloak on one character and it was time gated with certain currencies and I think rep in a couple different things. As I remember, the people were wanting to know, are we supposed to go and start this on another character? Because there was tanking, DPS, and healing cloaks. So if you had the tanking cloak and you went to a DPS spec, it would deactivate itself. So you had to go and do the whole long quest chain again in order to get a DPS cloak. And that Blizzard said, no, you should be playing one character. You shouldn't be working on alts at this point. And we were about, I want to say, Timeless Isle was out, so we were past 5.2. So we were about midway through the expansion. So it's not uncommon. As soon as if people get their main to max level, people automatically start leveling another character in some cases. So it's not uncommon, especially the later an expansion goes on. There's just less and less for you to do on your main characters or end content as you work through it. So I'm looking at the talents. I'm like, okay, I'm like, this is a little, to me, this is kind of a drawback that you have to either pick something uh, general, or you have to pick something that's absurdly specific to your spec. Now, I will say that most of the abilities that I have used have been fine. I haven't really found anything where I thought, oh, this is broken or this doesn't work as well as I thought. I have noticed some kind of a difference with everything I've used. And generally speaking, because the gear does the gear does scale with your level, item level and stats wise, it is the Azerite gear is well statted. I mean, when you get a piece, it feels like you really got a piece of armor. The eye level is helpful. In my case, the intellect and stamina is worthwhile. So that's all fine. I really have no complaint with any of that. It's a little weird to have gear that doesn't have a secondary stat. Even our artifacts had secondary stats. Even the Heart of Azeroth has secondary stats. However, I understand you're supposed to pick your abilities. So I picked a neutral ability that had a chance to increase critical strike, and I thought, oh, this is great. It helped with my healing. It helped with my DPS. Wasn't too bad. So then I unlock my second ability, and this is where my perspective started to change. This is where I kind of started to think about things a little more instead of just kind of going along with it, and then going to the next thing. My second ability was Resounding Protection on the first piece of gear that I had. Every 30 seconds, gain an absorb shield for X amount for 30 seconds. Now, the thing that struck me odd about this is it's the same ability as my legendary necklace, which I had to replace fairly early on because I got the Heart of Azeroth. And its effect was every 30 seconds gain an absorb shield for X% of your maximum health for 30 seconds. So almost the exact same ability. Every 30 seconds, you gain a shield that reapplies every 30 seconds. Now, what struck me odd about this was Blizzard said towards the end of Legion, they said, in hindsight, in regards to legendaries, giving you a legendary with somewhat lesser stats in exchange for what we thought would be a useful utility ended up maybe not being the best of ideas in hindsight or in practice. So when you look at it in that context, this is a worse legendary system than Legion. While I liked having my shield back, because this actually came in quite helpful for me. I wasn't sure. This was one of those legendaries people weren't sure about. I saw consistent opinions throughout Legion. This was my first legendary in Legion. And it actually ended up being really helpful for a restoration shaman because I just always had that little bit of extra protection, whether I was doing a world quest or a raid or what have you. Of course, it turns itself off in battlegrounds, as did trinkets and set pieces and things like that. So when I had to replace it right off, I thought, oh well, that's kind of I was a little discouraged because I thought, well, I've got my legendary, so these will carry me through a little longer into the expansion. Um, so I was kind of excited, but then I thought, well, wait, this kind of goes back on what they said though, because all these abilities are random, by the way, which I found out when I started to replace my Azerite armor with upgrades. The first couple pieces I had, as I remember, were about the same talents. Like the first one was the same, and the second one maybe was different, or they were exactly the same. So it wasn't too drastic of a change. As I leveled up, and of course, as I said, you level up, the gear scales. So almost every time I got a piece of Azerite armor, it was an upgrade. I had to not only swap out, but pick completely different abilities, which towards the end of my leveling made it really I think it's fair to say difficult, because I had healing abilities. As I said, the first ability I had, increased critical strike. Well, I did not realize completely how much that was helping me heal. Towards the last couple levels, towards 120, were really kind of a struggle. They were really weird, and I couldn't figure out why. I said, okay, granted, your stats kind of get all over the place because just gear is dropping randomly, and you really don't have as much. You really don't have much in the way of picking the stats you want and things like that. So my stats got a little jumbled up. So I tried to work on those, and I thought, I'm getting stuff kind of more how I think it works best. Why is it not changing? Well, because of my Azerite abilities. And in this case, for example, I really don't use Spirit Link Totem that much. When I look at the other ones, though, really don't use Heroism that much. Probably use Heroism less than I use Spirit Link Totem. I've tried Secrets of the Deep. I didn't like it. This is a DPS only ability. I'm guessing Elemental, since I'm in Elemental. And then, of course, this is a Restoration, because I only have Spirit Link Totem as Restoration. So either you need to have one set of gear with abilities for one specific spec, or you need to somehow mismatch them so they work on both or all three of your specs, depending on your class. Or you need to have multiple sets of Azerite armor, which to me seems a little weird considering where we are in the game. It's just I came to the conclusion by the time I had reached 120, it was a good idea, but it was somewhat poorly executed. It's just it's too. I feel like every time I change a piece of gear and I have to pick different abilities, that I'm starting over in some way, and I don't like that feeling. I'm 120. I'm doing mythics, and I'm doing world quest. I want to feel like I'm progressing. If you're constantly throwing a learning curve, I'm not good with learning curves. Once I figure something out, I figure it out to get the basics of it, and then I figure it out to master it, so to speak. If there's something that's constantly ever changing, that's why there's some things in the game I don't like to do, because it's kind of always changing. You kind of always have to learn things. With PvP, for example, it's going to be a different battleground because you're going to have, 30 different people. You're going to have different people on your team. You're going to have different people on your team. So you're not entirely sure what's going to happen. You have different skill caps and things like that. But for the most part, the battlegrounds are the same. The objectives are the same. It's just a matter of coordinating those 15 people on your team to reach the objective. That I have no problem with. Raids, on the other hand, even though it's the same fight every time, you're learning every time. You're going to be doing something different every time. And that's where, there's a learning curve there. And that's where I feel like I tend to have trouble a little bit. And that's what this feels like to me. And then the abilities that I like, you can't, you have no way of getting them back. You can't, as far as I know, you can't re-roll these. You can reset your gear to pick different abilities, but you can't pick new abilities. The other thing I was thinking was I have gotten quite a bit of Azerite gear. You won't have difficulty getting Azerite gear. You can't do anything with it except vendor it, except sell it. Now, why you couldn't turn this actually into Azerite power, you can take PvP gear and turn it in for a currency to get different PvP gear. Essentially, basically just a different recolor. Still, you have, they reward your effort in some way. It seems strange to me. This is supposed to be somehow enhanced by Azerite, and we're just selling it. We're not vendoring it. We're not somehow turning it into Azerite power or anything else. We're just vendoring it. So, like I said, I think it's a good concept. I think it's just somewhat poorly executed, and it's when you think of it in terms of, and I've seen a few different abilities that are reminiscent of legendary utilities from Legion. Having to, now I will say, each piece of gear you get does seem to give you one ability per spec. However, like I said, like this really isn't that useful. I've had other abilities that were far more useful than this. And right now, I'm really not doing mythics because I've gotten my eye level up to more of where I wanted it. I've been trying to work on other things now. So I'm really not playing much in Restoration. So this ability is just basically wasted. Now, I could go re-roll it, but I don't want to have to go re-roll my abilities every time I want to change specs. Granted, I can kind of see having different sets. I personally did not mind having different sets. It's a lot more convenient not having that, but that's why they put the ability. That's why they put the ability to have intellect and agility and strength and all of that on one piece of gear, so we didn't have to do that anymore. So, and this doesn't change, and as you get epic pieces and you go up, then your 2, 3 abilities turn into 4 abilities, and so forth and so on. The last one increases your item level by 5, which to me just seems so random. I don't even know why. The gear in and of itself is a pretty decent upgrade. Upgrading your gear by 5 doesn't really seem to do much, from what I can tell. I didn't notice a big difference. It's not like, oh, that's the big upgrade or anything like that. So yeah, so there we go. So not bad item level and stats wise. Like I said, it feels like you got an upgrade, but the RNG of it, I think, is a big drawback. And I'm really surprised with the people that have been doing, grinding out mythics and been trying to do like the been trying to do raids and things like that, that people would be okay with this. Because as a raider, you have to have pretty specific um, talents and abilities. And if you get an upgrade and that upgrade doesn't have the same abilities as your old piece, I would think that would be a problem. Um, so yeah, so there you go, folks. There's my thoughts and perhaps my ramblings on Azerite Armor. Hope you enjoyed that, and thank you for watching.